heard this before, and so it's going to be repetitious for some of you, but I'm still going to try to go through all the details because I think for folks who have not heard it, I want to try to be comprehensive. So I'm Martin Dunn, the president of Dunn Development Corp. We've been doing affordable and supportive housing in New York State for more than 20 years, including mixed income and mixed use developments. We've developed thousands of units in more than 50 buildings. And our reputation is for very high quality buildings in both the way we construct them and the way we operate them. And we're very committed to what we do and to being a responsible owner and developer. So several years ago, we were selected by the city to be the new developer of the T building. I think people know the history of proposals for this building go back probably a dozen years unsuccessfully. But one of our specialties has been integrated supportive housing, models of supportive housing where individuals who have some kind of special needs live in integrated settings with working families. And we've done that numerous times, and we've done it very successfully. We're also known for mixing a range of incomes, and for so this project will have not only affordable housing for people of low income, but also moderate and middle income. And I'll go into what that means and with specifics. So for people, I think everyone knows where the T building is, but if you don't, it's on the Queens Hospital Center campus, and it's on the corner. It's on Parsons Blvd between 82nd Drive and Goethals. So going back, because I know for at one point there had been a proposal to knock it down, saying the building wasn't structurally sound. Knock it down, we're going to build something new. First thing we did when we were engaged was to walk the building with our structural engineers and our facade consultants and quickly dispelled any notion of knocking the building down. It's structurally sound, and as people know, it's an architectural gem. The next thing we did was listen to the other feedback on the proposals that have been presented and made adaptations from what previous developers had proposed, including looking at kind of demographic information from the neighborhood about household sizes, incomes, and stuff like that, so we could target our proposal. So our plan is, again, to do a mixed income and a mixed use project on the site. So first thing would be the rehabilitation of the building. The building's about 238,000 square feet. So it'll be a historic restoration of the exterior and including the balconies. I know there's been talk at one point about removing the balconies. The balconies will be restored, and a number of important items on the interior. So we know some of you walked the building, some of the preservation groups and activists walked the building specifically to talk about some of that and to tell us things that were important to save. So we've hired a team of historic consultants and engineers, and have begun engaging with the New York State Historic Preservation Office, so known as SHPO. They've walked the building with us. And so I think the good news for the people that are concerned about the historic preservation is that we're in the process of filing it to be placed on the National Register of Historic Places, and we will do the historic restoration under the auspices of the National Park Service and New York SHPO. So it'll be even a more complete restoration than the previous commitments we've made. So I know that will make certain people very happy. And for people that are wondering why it's a significant building, it's partly the modern architecture, but it's also partly the social history. This was designed under Mayor LaGuardia in the Public Works Administration during the New Deal time, and it was a real model for healthcare and specifically for tuberculosis, in that access to natural light and ventilation, so high ceilings of balconies and lots of windows was kind of a modern thing at the time. So it's a mixture of the architectural and social history that makes it qualified for the National Register. And so we will be using federal historic tax credits as part of that. That brings the involvement of the National Park Service. So other things that we've changed from what the previous developer proposed. Previous developer proposed more than 300 units. We've reduced that to approximately 206, and we did that by reducing the number of smaller units, reducing the number of studios, and adding more 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. So we also added 20,000, and so the 206 units was our estimate. As we've gone to a historic renovation on the inside, we are making changes They're requiring us to maintain the 10-foot wide hospital corridors and a number of other things. So that unit count, it may be closer to 200, but that's something we're currently working on. So we've also added 20,000 feet of non-residential space to the building. 12,000 of that will be for the Health and Hospitals Corporation for non-patient care, so administrative offices, and 8,000 square feet available for community use, a Hope For Community Center, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes. And all of that 20,000 feet of non-residential space, that's separate from the space in the residential portion of the building, the community room, the social service offices, a computer room, library. That's in addition to the 20,000. The 20,000 feet is not tied to our apartments. So 103 parking spaces will be dedicated to our building in the parking lot in front of the T building along Parsons Blvd. And another major change we made was we reduced the number of supportive housing units. The previous proposal had between 175 and 182 supportive housing units. We reduced that to 75. So there'd be 75 studio apartments. I'll get into some more detail about what the supportive housing will be, but that'll be about 18% of the residents in the building. It's roughly 36% of the apartments, but since that's for the supportive housing is single adults and a lot of the other units are family units, it'll be about 18% of the people in the building. The unit distribution, again, this may change slightly as we work through the historic preservation issues, but so it's the 75 supportive units. For the non-supportive units, 15 studios, 49 one-bedrooms, 59 two-bedrooms, one of which will be the live-in superintendent's unit, and 8 three-bedrooms. In doing that unit distribution, we look at the household size of renter households as opposed to people who own their own homes in the neighborhood, and people are often surprised to learn that 60% of renter households in the community are 1 or 2 person households. Only 20% are households of 4 or more persons, and only 8% are 5 or more persons. We also add the moderate middle income units. So we're proposing that 40% of the non-supportive units be moderate middle income. So up to 100% of the area median income, we're up to as high as $110,000. So this chart's hard to read, so we have, and this is, you can pass these around. This is what's on the chart. Hopefully we have enough copies. So for each household, for each unit size, studio through 3 bedrooms, there's 2 rent levels and there's corresponding income levels. So the studio, so it's ranging for people earning to a little under $28,000 to people earning a little over $110,000 annually. And the rents ranging for studio apartments from $761 to $1,091 per month, and for up to 3 bedrooms ranging from $1,339 to $1,910. And these income and rent numbers are updated annually by the city. They actually recently released 2018 numbers, and when those get finalized, those will be added. But once the project opens, this sets the rents and the income levels when you move in. So once someone moves in, there's no limits on what happens to their income, and then rent levels adjust annually by rent stabilization. They become rent stabilized units. So this income range, 27,000 or 28,000 to 110,000, we think would serve about half of the renters. About half of all renter households in Community District 8 would be eligible within that range. Let's see what else. On the supportive housing, we know, so this would be permanent housing. This is not transitional housing. It's not shelters. It's permanent housing, and supportive housing just means housing with on-site support services. And so the target for those supportive housing units would be high-cost Medicaid users referred by the Health and Hospitals Corporation. The idea is that people are currently using Queens Health Network services, for example, someone who's in inpatient care and is otherwise ready to be discharged but lacks appropriate housing. So to address their people's needs and to enable them to live independently in this integrated setting, there'll be a number of features. One is 24-hour front desk staffing. So they'll be part of the social service staff, but it'll appear like a doorman building. So there'll be a front desk attendants that are part of the social service staff, but for the non-supportive housing residents, that someone will accept your package and greet your visitors and call up and say, Mrs. Jones, your nephew's on his way up. And so it's an amenity as well as part of the social service provision. In addition to that, there's on-site support service staff, social workers, case managers. They'll connect people to services in the community and address any issues they're facing. They'll often also staff the amenity space. So there'll be a community room and again a computer room library. We'll try to get an exercise room in. And those staff will help also do Halloween parties for the kids in the building and 4th of July barbecues and other things, movie nights and other things that build community and recreation activities in the building. The funding for those supportive housing units will be under the city's NYC 1515 project, or initiative I should say. And so rental subsidies from the city's housing department and support services subsidies from the Human Resources Administration. I know there have been I know that a couple questions have come up. One is the number of units. Will it go above? Will we all of a sudden change, from 75 supportive housing units for the Health and Hospitals Corporation populations? No, that's a fixed number. That's what we've agreed to. There's also been questions raised about, are the people that live in those units going to be problems in the neighborhood? So I want to spend a few minutes talking about why our interests are the same as the interests of the neighbors in the community and how we'll approach this. So, if someone's going to be a problem in the neighborhood to homeowners or other people in the neighborhood, they would be a bigger problem to us in our building. They have to share a laundry room and a computer room and a community room and a hallway and elevators. And they're sharing a wall with working families, and so if they're going to be a problem in the neighborhood, they'd be a bigger problem for us. And so there's a number of things we do. Again, there's going to be people making $60,000, $80,000, $100,000, $110,000 living in this building. The building has to be successful as a quality place to live. And so what do we do to make it successful? And there's four key things. One is those units are spread throughout the building. There's not a separate wing or a separate floor. It's fully integrated. Those 75 supportive housing units will be across all floors. Second thing is we put people in the building who are ready to live independently and live in an integrated setting with working families. And so that means there's a real screening process. There's lots of levels of supportive housing. There's licensed care. There's care with more rules and more services. This is the most independent level of housing, and this will be for the people that are ready to live in that most independent level. So in addition to this, in addition to the screenings that the supportive service providers do, so first Health and Hospitals Corporation would screen people for people they think are appropriate, then our social service provider would do their own screenings, and then lastly our management company does screenings. In addition to the assessments by the service providers, we do criminal background checks, sex offender registry checks, and in-person interviews, and sometimes home visits as well. And we set a standard for the building, and we follow it consistently. So our standard is we do not accept sex offenders, registered sex offenders at any level. We also screen out people convicted of violent crimes, so felonies classes A through E, and drug sales, trafficking, arson, and a few other things. The fourth thing is that if people are a problem in the building, again, before they're a problem in the neighborhood, they're likely a problem with their neighbors who they share a wall and common spaces with. We evict people who are problems. Where the support services staff can't address them. There's going to be a whole bunch of people on site working with people to enable them to be successful, living independently, but when people aren't successful, we will move them out to a more appropriate setting. Again, there's supportive housing with much higher level of services. And so the last thing I would say on that is that we have a very long track record of successfully doing this, where we have happy tenants, happy neighbors, happy community board members and civic organizations, and happy elected officials. The support service provider is Canva. They have a very long track record as well, more than 40 years. They serve more than 45,000 people annually. And I think very importantly, they have a long track record with us. They're our on-site service provider partner in 14 buildings. And so it's an extensive partnership, and we know that they have a proven track record of doing this and doing it with us and being responsive to our concerns as an owner and a neighbor. A few other things. One is there will be a preference for the Community Board 8 residents for 50% of the non-supportive housing units. Preference for 5% of units for municipal employees. Preference for 5% of the units for people with who are mobility disabled. 2% for people who are hearing or vision disabled. And this is all, I just want to give one caveat to that. That's unless the city's preferences are overturned. There's currently a lawsuit against the city saying that the community board preferences violate fair housing, which the city is litigating. Our hope is that even if that's successful, it will not affect community districts like Community District 8 in Queens, which is a very diverse district. The suit was really filed against some 3 community districts in Manhattan, which are predominantly that are not diverse and where people feel the preference violated fair housing. A few other things before I go to questions. One is we did make a deal to use Local 3, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers labor for this project. We worked out an agreement with them on staffing and wages. And I know for a number of you came on a tour. We hosted a tour, this is going several years back. A number of you came on a tour along with some of the elected officials and their representatives, and to tour a number of our buildings where we've done similar models, and people talk to residents, they visit apartments, they talk to neighbors, and so at some point, if people have questions, I'm hoping the people that were on that tour can share the feedback. I think people were genuinely impressed by the quality of our buildings and the standard of our operations. I'm going to talk for a minute about the community facility space. As I mentioned earlier, our plans include not only the 12,000 feet of Health and Hospitals Corporation's space, but 8,000 feet of community facility space. Community Board 8 had requested a multi-purpose community center, and we've been in discussions with Queens Community House about that, and they're interested in operating such a program. To facilitate this, Councilmember Lansman secured a commitment from the city, because this is city financed. He secured a commitment. Part of Community Board 8's request, or Queens Community House request, was rent-free space, so they would have so that funds could go towards. It's hard enough to raise money for to run the program. So the request was a rent-free space. Councilmember Lansman did secure that commitment from the city that additional subsidies would be put in to enable that space to be rent-free. The remaining obstacle for that is that Queens Community House was responsible for funding the build-out of the space. The core and shell was part of the affordable housing budget, but the build-out of that space for the community center was to be raised separately, and Queens Community House has requested money, capital money from the City Council and the Queensborough President, but that is, they've said their ability to do this is contingent on them raising the money for the build-out. If it's not a multi-purpose community center, we'd look for another program that would be beneficial to the community, another nonprofit community facility program. Community Advisory Board, also at the request of Councilmember Lansman, we agreed to form a Community Advisory Board that would start when we start construction. So it would be in place while we're in construction. If there's issues that arise during construction, it would meet quarterly during construction, meet every 2 months when we start occupancy for the first 6 months, and then quarterly with a plan to revisit the frequency and the necessity after 1 year. I'll be honest, we don't have community advisory boards in any of our other projects. We don't have any community issues in any of our other projects, but we'll keep the community advisory board as long as people feel it's needed. In terms of timeline, so we do have, this made it through the Health and Hospitals Corporation board a year and a half ago. We made it through the City Council in December, and we are in the midst of all the architectural, engineering, historic preservation, environmental reviews. Our goal is to start construction in February or March of next year. So before we open to questions, I'm just going to show a few pictures of sites that we've done. This is in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, in the middle of a brownstone neighborhood. That's in the Williamsburg waterfront. That's Kent Avenue, North Fifth Street. We did our building surrounded by luxury condominiums. That's a building of ours up by Yankee Stadium. That's a building we did at the edge of Fort Greene by the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where we have, it's a mixture of home ownership and affordable and middle income and homeless housing. We actually have more homeless units than market rate units, but we sold, for some people who visited this, we sold the market rate houses that shared open space with the supportive housing sold for $2.3 million for 2,300 square foot houses. And everyone's getting along great and sharing the common areas. This is an example of our lobby. We won't be able to be necessarily so modern with a historic building, but that's an example of an attendant lobby. You see the concierge desk and the artwork and the lighting. That's another one of our in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And again, it looks like a doorman building, but the person that sits at that desk is actually a trained part of the social service staff. I think one more lobby, a few of our community rooms. These are some of the amenity spaces for residents in the building. Then we also have, in these buildings, we put a computer room library. And then we always do beautiful outdoor space. We'll do terraces on some of the upper floors, and we'll improve the landscaping and add a children's play area somewhere around the site. These are just a few of our roof terraces. I think that might be it, and I will now open the questions. Oh, that's the common green of our Navy Green project. Again, home ownership condominiums, private townhouses, supportive housing, low and moderate income, all sharing these open spaces, the children's play area, the lawns. Is that the last one?
Yeah.
Okay. First hand up was.
Okay, thank you. My name is Judith Gutman. We've met before. First of all, I want to commend you on the choice of your preservationist. We interviewed her for Parkway Village, which is on the National Register. And I just want to say that the building is eligible for National Register, so some work is in the pipeline already. Okay, so I wanted to thank you for that, going in that direction. But my concern is the same one I had when we had the hearing at the hospital, which is you guys are going to do a great job inside the facility, but Parkway Village is an ungated community. Directly across the street, Satigurdy Hall lives a few feet away from the gate. And I just want to know, I asked the politicians that night, because it's not your responsibility, would they at least sort of drive by with police cars or have some kind of presence in the neighborhood in case we had any problems? I've never gotten an answer. I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, again, I think, look, the idea that we'll do a good job in the building, but people might be a problem in the neighborhood, it's, the first part is screening people to make sure they're ready to live in the community. Like, I know there's concerns about, you know, if people have a beautiful new home, their own bathroom, their own kitchen, they're going to be cooking their own meals, why, you know, thrilled to have this beautiful apartment that's going to be nicer than most any other option someone coming out of going into supportive housing has. There's no, we have no history ever of people causing problems anywhere in the neighborhood. These are people that have been screened and that their staff working with to get them to go back to school, to get employment, to be, you know, to attend civic association meetings, you know, become productive members of colleges, I mean, of the community. People, you know, when they get the housing back, they go pursue all the dreams that might have been put on hold when they, you know, when they were in a housing crisis, or they were homeless, or they were in the hospital, right? What's reconnecting with family? We find, you know, almost half of the people in the supportive housing have kids that they may have become disconnected to when they have whatever their problems. So their priority is to get, or they have grandkids now, their priority is to get reconnected with family, put their life back on track. The last thing they're doing to look is to become a problem for Parkway Village neighbors or anyone else. They have a beautiful home. They have things to go do, right? So that's our approach. We've never, here, like in this one, you can leave our building, you can go right into someone's backyard and go up and look, but why?
One problem I have with all this new housing going on all over the city, and this is included, you're going to bring about roughly estimated 400 or 500 new people into our community. Have you or the city consulted with the Board of Ed to make sure there's enough seats in the schools? Have you checked out the number of retail stores where they can go shopping? I mean, has the MTA been spoken to about bringing more busing to that area? Why are you overcrowding the neighborhood without without external services?
So we're in the middle of our environmental assessment review that looks at public schools, transportation, open space,
So if it
air
comes
quality.
out there's not enough room in the schools or anything, this project could be killed? I mean, if there's not enough stores for them to shop in?
Yeah, well, no, first of all,
What do you want to kill it for?
No, I'm just I don't want to kill, I'm just saying,
No.
when you have too many lines on, at stores.
I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure that retail is something that's addressed in the cities. So there's a process called City Environmental Quality Review that has all the assessments. To be honest, I'm not sure if shopping is part of that, because it's not a government service. Open space, I know, but so open space, you know, parks and open space, schools, transportation, all those things, air quality, all those things are assessed, as are shadows. But if it's new construction, there'd be shadow assessments. So yes, we are reviewing those. Will a project die? No, you have to remediate them. So for example, if we there's projects where if there's gonna be overcrowding of schools, before they approve the action, you have to add classrooms, and so that does happen. We don't expect it here, but we're in the middle of that process. And so if you know, if a stoplight had to be added, the stoplight would be added. If there's not enough open space, sometimes you'll see projects where they say, again, if this was new construction, they'll say, for example, the recent Pfizer site in Williamsburg, there's as part of that approval, because there was a lack of open space, the developer had to build a certain amount of publicly accessible open space. So it's 400 feet by 65 foot wide esplanade that's available to the public 365 days a year. So yes, you have to remediate stuff if you exceed the thresholds or there's overcrowding. We are in the middle of that process. We've engaged a very well-respected environmental review consultant. When I say environmental, that means community stuff. And so that's a process. Then yes, it's reviewed by Department of Transportation, Department of Education, all Board of Education, Parks Department. It goes through the Housing Department. It goes out to all of them for comment before it gets finalized.
Sounds like you're doing an EIS?
EAS.
EAS?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
environmental assessment statement versus environmental impact statement, it's triggered by the scale of the project. We're not at the scale that triggers an EIS. It's just two different standards. It's all governed by the city's environmental quality review, which is only triggered because of Health and Hospitals Corporation doing the lease, by the way. It's not required if there wasn't a public disposition of the site or lease. By the way, it's a long-term ground lease. Yes, here they are.
Are you allowing animals, dogs? That's a big.
We do not.
You don't. Okay.
However,
So
if
it's
people
not-
have service dogs, we can't deny people have service dogs. But we will both be in a no smoking building. We do not allow smoking, and we will not allow. We do not allow dogs. Again, people can go through the process for a service animal, and then we try to restrict the size. But there's there's a federal right for people to have the accommodation. So we try not to let people abuse that. You have to get a letter from the doctor and other things.
Yeah, my question is, I'm concerned about the parking. You said there are 103 spaces, and you have 206 residential units.
Yeah.
And that would be like a major problem. First of all, the 103 spaces, where will that be located?
It's where go back to the. It's what's now the visitor parking. They're gonna Health and Hospitals will.
Sorry.
Because as it is now, there's a crisis.
It's the visitor parking right here.
103, probably you have 206 residential units.
Yeah. So 75 of them will be supported. We expect the car ownership there to be 0. And on I think car ownership for renters within the affordable range is probably 20% in New York City. The middle income units we expect higher demand for parking. We expect the parking to almost exclusively be used by the middle income units. We think we'll have more than enough parking. The 103 is the requirement. We could, not 50% of the 206 units.
What about the space behind the T building that is being utilized as a parking garage right now?
All the area where they have the stackers and stuff,
Yeah.
that's Health and Hospitals Corporation. They'll continue that, and I think
That's
they may even
HOC.
add, they have an operator, but I think there's even more area in that center that they plan to add more stackers to deal with the
Personnel? Okay.
their
One more question, please. You were saying about mixed use of
Yeah.
the building. Can you elaborate a little bit
mixed
more on
use
that?
means there's not just residential, there's 20,000 square feet, 12,000. Health and Hospitals Corporation they have staff they still use parts of 3 floors, and they have some site, what was supposed to be temporary trailers on the site. So they're gonna move, their plan is to move people back in there, administrative staff. So 12,000 feet for Health and Hospice Corporation, for Queens Hospital, and then 8,000 feet for this community facility use, which is hopefully gonna be a multi-purpose community center, but let's say there's a daycare center or early childhood or something like that.
So do we have a blueprint of what it would look like after everything is constructed?
The blue, you mean the floor plans?
Not yet.
We're working
I
on
mean,
that.
like the outside of it, and where the
outside's the
cars
same.
it.
You're a little premature.
So
Well,
it's-
finish
Yeah,
up,
there.
if you go back to the main building, the next. So our residential entrance will be through the main entrance there. The community, the non-residential space, as people know, Parsons slopes down. So this is the first floor of the building, up a ramp. There's a series of steps, and they added a ramp for handicapped accessibility. So there's like windows here that are actually in the basement. But when you're around the other side, it's on grade. So it's the full level's above grade where the old, if people have been there, where the old cafeteria and kitchen was, that will be where the big tall space with the skylights. It's a one-story. There's a big one-story or two-story. There's a big one-story extension and a two-story extension in the back that's on grade. And that's where the community facility space will be in the HVAC space. So it'll be on what would be the base level from the front and on grade from the back. So where the site slopes down, where there's a temporary construction trailer, by there is where you'd enter for the community, for the non-residential space.
Another question.
Yeah, and then I think Florence.
Alright. How do you designate if it's a parking spot?
We do what we normally, if there's more demand than the spaces, then we do a lottery.
Lottery.
Yeah, but
We
we'll
never
set.
have to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
you don't?
We don't have a lot of
That's good.
demand.
So they pay
usually.
for parking?
Yes, we'll charge
Yeah.
some, not a
Minimal?
super, $50, 30, and
Monthly, like-
I'll tell you, we've never, this zoning we've never had anywhere close to 50% of the residents having cars. We have spots, we have ones where, we have parking for 25% of the spots and the parking's half full. Now, again, we have more, the higher your income, the more likely you are to have a car. So the higher income ones, we think there'll be a higher demand. But of the 131 non-supportive units, I think it was 50 middle income. Even if all of them have cars, there's another 53 spots for the 79 low income. There's just, the car ownership's not that
Yeah.
high.
And you said that you wanna get rid of the terrace?
No.
Oh, you're not?
No, all the balconies will stay.
No.
Well, and actually, this shows one misleading thing. This shows that being filled in,
Uh-huh.
and that being filled in, which we can't do with National Park.
Wrong picture, yeah.
Yeah, this was
Should've
an
used
architect
historic.
that rendered that in, because at one point the plan was to close in that one and that one, but not if we're doing with the SHPO process. But we'll make some of these into landscaped terraces, not all of them, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. The top floor up here will have other amenity space, again, a computer room, library, and exercise room, or.
I'd just
Yeah.
like to point out that public transportation is very good in this area. Because you've got Union Turnpike with all the buses that run to
Right,
and
express
from,
buses
yeah.
too.
Right.
So
Buses are
hopefully,
Yeah.
the residents will take advantage of that.
Parsons Boulevard sucks.
It's not just one lane. You got side bicycle lane and the one lane.
It's one lane
This, it's
That's another
crazy.
story.
In the morning, the traffic is like from the subway all the way to Union Turnpike. You're crawling.
I'm talking about Union Turnpike, not Parsons.
Right.
No, well, yeah, this
I
is
know,
on
I know,
Parsons.
you're on Parsons.
No, this is on Parsons too.
Yeah, I know.
Did you have a question?
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other
So,
questions?
Yeah, just want to ask you something. So basically, this is a go.
It's a go.
There's nothing
We still have
that's
to get
gonna-
we have to get all of our finances in the housing department lined up, but they're the ones sponsoring this, so we're confident, but
Anybody holding up the sponsoring?
no.
No?
The only thing, again, I know the Community Board H is very concerned about the community center. That does need, if it's gonna be, so Queens Community House, they run other multi-purpose centers, and they said they could bring some of their programming here, a number of things, but not if they have, to pay rent. So we got them the free rent, but they And originally they were more confident that they could come up with the capital, but that's the struggle right now, is the capital money to do the interior build out, which, again, there's applications in to the city council and the borough president right now, and we'll know that in June when the budget's passed.
So you're talking about they need money for salaries?
No,
and-
for the capital, for
To
the.
build it.
So we're doing the core and
Oh,
shell.
build the inside and out.
The sprinklers,
Queens Community House has to do the building of that,
in just the interior fit out.
the interior? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the original deal, that they, you know, that the request was rent-free space, core and shell, so we, you know, put in we
They'll
do
be
the
able
window,
to
we
do
redo
it.
the windows, the facades, the sprinklers,
They'll be able
clear.
to do it.
What?
They'll be able to raise the money.
Yeah, that's our hope.
DHCR has nothing to do with that.
No, not
No.
DHCR, because we're, it'll be financed through the city. So our financing sources are tax, maybe or maybe not tax exempt bonds, but low-income housing tax credits and the historic tax credits and loans from the city. Interest, loans where the interest gets deferred and the principal gets deferred until the end. So subsidized loans, tax credits. And then some regular loan as well. So it's also, there's some real debt.
I have a question concerning the financing. Once you're set up, is your you're paying rent to the Health and Hospital Corporation, or you're paying real estate? How's that work?
No, well, so the way this is structured legally is the Health and Hospitals Corporation leases it from the city. So all the Health and Hospitals Corporation sites are under one master ground lease from the city. So the Health and Hospitals Corporation will be subleasing it to us. And so we're not paying rent. In lieu of the rent, we're providing them the 12,000 square feet of space back. And there's no real estate taxes because Health and Hospitals Corporation doesn't pay the city. If there were, normally we get a real estate tax exemption for the building, but we don't have to because Health and Hospitals is not paying taxes on the land now. But we pay our water, sewer, and other utility charges. Yes, down at the end?
We have fine shopping on Main Street off of Union Turnpike. There's a Key Food there. There's another Key Food further down Parsons Blvd. There's shopping along Main Street right up until almost the expressway. We have also a shopping center on Queens Boulevard in Briarwood. And that's a very good shopping center also. It's a short bus trip away. If people want to go further eastward on Union Turnpike, the buses are very regular Union Turnpike. They can go into the Hillcrest section and there's shopping there, very good shopping. If they really want to go far, just go 5-minute trip up Union Turnpike to Queens Boulevard, Forest Hills. So the shopping is there. The public schools are fine, 117 and 217 in Briarwood. Si, would you say that? Good. We also have 164, 165, 201, 168. Junior high school is now a different school name. And they're good schools, and as far as I know, they're not overcrowded. We don't see any new modular buildings outside, which means overcrowding. I think that these people would be, I think they would like living in the neighborhood.
And you've got that great
We
new
welcome them.
building
Thank you.
over on Goethals next to the stupid ambulance parking lot. But it's a wonderful school.
Gateway School.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Somebody have questions? Okay. Great presentation.
Quality of life.
We'll do a big, when we kick off, we'll do a big groundbreaking. We'll also do a big
Oh,
ribbon
yeah,
cut.
we have to do that.
Oh, you have to postpone it.
Yes,
We'll schedule it around you.
don't worry, we'll wait till we get all we won't do it before March, mid-March?
End of March.
End of March. Done.
I
That'd be
have some
great.
questions on the sign-in sheet. I can't read your names. Just two.
It's not me.
Somebody named Connie Clausen?
Clausen.
C-L-A-U-S-E-N?
That was great.
What is a ribbon cut?
So I should say, we expected we're hoping to start, close on financing, start construction in February, March. It will probably take between 18 to 20 months. The historic restoration of the facade is a significant process. There's we'll be doing 3 or 4 months of asbestos removal in the building. There's a lot of work, so you think it won't be any faster, unfortunately, than a new construction, but it's 18 months, 20 months, 22 months.
Are you gonna remove the asbestos safely?
No.
No, they're gonna let it go open with, you know, especially the Parkway Village.
All right, one more question at the end?
I did a little research on my own. I'm an historian, and about the mid-2000s, something called Skyline Terrace was proposed. A high-end, really fancy schmancy building that would turn into senior housing, but of a most exclusive sort.
Yeah.
And that lasted, the idea, they tried to sell the apartments, then came the terrible 2008
Yeah.
situation, and the economy dropped, so you had to give it up. One of the things that they found out, the New York State Department of Insurance had to okay Skyline Towers. They did a thorough search and testing of the building. They found it to be secure and strong. Some people were passing around, oh, it's gonna fall apart.
Yeah.
It didn't.
Yeah.
New York State Department of Insurance went there, I'll give you the names of the people,
Yeah.
they looked into it in 2002, 3, 4, and they said that it's solid housing, it's
Yeah.
solid building.
She's got good
And
bones.
so they allowed senior housing to go ahead.
Yeah, it was supposed to be an assisted, senior luxury assisted living, which didn't make it.
It's high-end stuff.
Yeah.
Real high, 6 figures.
Yeah, same, actually, same architect we're using, those SLC architects, we're using the same
You had to
firm.
put down a $350,000 deposit, plus 1 bedroom was $3,500 a month, and when you moved out, died, whatever, you'd get your $350,000 deposit back. Very, very expensive, and they only sold 15 out of the 150 apartments, that was all. So it disappeared.
In
So they built their
2008
own-
came, they couldn't sell apartments.
So they built
You're
their
right.
own across the street.
Hello.
All right, thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you, thank you, appreciate it.